They planned to send fuel across enemy seas without a single ship ever being seen. No convoys, no tankers, just a silent artery beneath the water, and if it failed, the invasion of Europe could collapse before it even began. This is the story of a World War II operation that was designed, prepared, and then quietly abandoned. By late 1941, the Second World War had become a war of fuel. Armies no longer moved by horses or rail schedules. They moved on gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel, and without it, even the largest force became useless. Britain understood this better than anyone. After the fall of France in June 1940, the United Kingdom stood alone against Nazi Germany. Every drop of fuel that kept Britain alive arrived by sea, and German U-boats were hunting those lifelines relentlessly. By 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic was at its most dangerous phase. Tankers burned, crews drowned, fuel shortages were no longer hypothetical, they were expected. At the same time, Allied planners were already thinking ahead. They knew that sooner or later, they would have to return to the European continent. And when that day came, fuel would decide everything. In early 1942, British engineers began asking a radical question. What if fuel didn't have to travel by ship at all? What if gasoline could flow invisibly, continuously, beneath the sea directly from Britain to the battlefield? At first, the idea sounded impossible. Pipelines were common on land, but under the sea, across miles of hostile water, had never been attempted on this scale. No one knew if it could work, no one knew if it could be hidden. But the risk of doing nothing was worse. By mid-1942, Allied intelligence estimates suggested that once an invasion of Europe began, fuel consumption would exceed anything seen before. Armored divisions, motorized infantry, and tactical air forces would need millions of gallons every single day. And every gallon delivered by ship would be a target. By late 1942, the idea was formalized. The project was given a deliberately boring name to avoid attention: Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. What most people don't know is that Pluto was never just one plan. From the beginning, Allied engineers considered multiple routes, multiple seabeds, and multiple invasion timelines. One of those plans was far more ambitious than anything eventually used. It was known internally as the Northern Route. Operation Pluto North. The concept behind Pluto North was simple and terrifying. Instead of waiting for a secure beachhead in France, this pipeline would be laid much earlier and much farther north, beneath waters still patrolled by German submarines and aircraft. The goal was to deliver fuel directly to advancing Allied forces moving through northern Europe, potentially weeks or even months ahead of schedule. By early 1943, planners were quietly studying possible routes across the North Sea. Scotland to Norway, Scotland to Denmark, or later to liberated ports in northern France or the Low Countries. Each route promised enormous strategic advantages. Fuel could arrive without convoys. Ports wouldn't be immediately required. And German intelligence would struggle to detect a pipeline hidden on the seabed. If it worked, it would change the logistics of modern warfare forever. By mid-1943, experimental work began in absolute secrecy. British engineers tested two radically different pipeline designs. One was flexible, made of layers of steel and rubber, wound onto massive drums like cable. The other was rigid steel pipe, welded in sections and laid carefully along the seabed. Both designs had serious problems. Flexible lines risked rupturing under pressure. Rigid pipes were heavy, slow to deploy, and vulnerable during installation. But both were technically possible. And that terrified German planners if they had known. As 1943 turned into 1944, Allied invasion planning accelerated. Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, was scheduled for the summer of 1944. Fuel estimates were revised upward again and again. By early 1944, planners calculated that within weeks of landing, Allied forces would need over 1 million gallons of fuel per day, just to keep moving. Every delay meant giving Germany time to regroup. This is where Pluto North re-entered serious discussion. Some planners argued that a northern pipeline, already feeding fuel into Europe, could allow faster breakthroughs after D-Day. Others believed it could support an alternative landing strategy altogether. But the risks were growing. The North Sea was not the English Channel. By early 1944, it remained one of the most dangerous naval environments in the world. German U-boats still operated there. Mines littered the seabed. Storms were violent and unpredictable. Laying a pipeline under those conditions would take weeks, possibly months, and any disruption could expose the entire operation. Worse still, if Germany discovered the pipeline during installation, it could be destroyed before ever delivering a single drop of fuel. And once discovered, the secret would be gone forever. Internal doubts began to surface. Engineering reports in early 1944 warned that maintaining pressure over longer northern distances would be extremely difficult. Pumping stations would need to operate continuously, and any failure could shut the entire line down. There were also political concerns. Pluto North would tie Allied logistics to uncertain liberation timelines. If northern ports were not captured on schedule, the pipeline would have nowhere to go. By March 1944, with D-Day only months away, Allied leadership faced a choice. Commit resources to a bold but fragile northern pipeline, or focus everything on a shorter, safer route across the English Channel after Normandy was secured. The decision was made quietly. In the spring of 1944, Operation Pluto North was shelved. Not cancelled publicly, not announced, simply removed from priority lists and allowed to fade into classified archives. Instead, planners focused on a southern Pluto route from the Isle of Wight to Normandy, a shorter distance, safer waters, and a guaranteed landing zone. That pipeline would eventually be laid after D-Day, beginning in August 1944. Pluto North never left the planning rooms. But the consequences of that decision were felt anyway. During the Allied advance across France in late summer 1944, fuel shortages repeatedly slowed operations. Tanks sat idle, trucks ran dry. In September 1944, the rapid advance stalled partly because supply lines could not keep up, a crisis remembered as the Red Ball Express emergency. Some logisticians later wondered what might have happened if fuel had already been flowing beneath the North Sea. Not as a miracle solution, not as a war-winning weapon, but as a margin, a few extra days, a few extra miles, a little more pressure on a retreating enemy. Operation Pluto North was never executed. No pipeline was laid. No fuel flowed. No headlines were written. And yet, it reveals something unsettling about World War II. The war was not only decided by battles and generals, but by invisible systems beneath the surface, planned in silence and abandoned without a trace. Some weapons are remembered because they were used. Others are forgotten because they were never given the chance. And somewhere beneath the cold waters of the North Sea, a pipeline that never existed still reminds us how close history came to taking a different path.